Page 145 continued. Para. By the 13th century, the system of Gango administration became completely feudal, for in 1295 we find Nrsimhadeva II, page 144, the builder of the Sun Temple at Konarak, granting 2 villages to the Kumara Mahapatra Bhima Deva Sarman, 35, who, as can be inferred from his title Mahapatra, was a minister under this king. As a part of this grant, which was made on the occasion of a lunar eclipse, the Dhoni also received 1 Sreshti, S-R-E-S-T-H-I, merchant, 1 Tambuli, betel seller, 1 Tamrakara, coppersmith, and 1 Kamsakara, brazier, B-R-A-Z-I-E-R, all from different villages, 36. Apparently, the purpose was to make their services available to the self-sufficient estate of the Mahapatra, who may have granted them some land for their maintenance. For by the same grant, Nrsimhadeva II allots half a Vatika of a land to a Tamrakara coppersmith named Nadi, 37. The instances quoted above are not many, but unless we have evidence to the contrary, it would be fair to conclude that the important medieval dynasties of Orissa, the Bhanjas, Soma Vangsis and Greta Gangos, paid their vassals and officials by land grants. Para. In the neighboring kingdom of Bundelkhand, ruled by the Chandelas, we find that land grants were occasionally made to civil and frequently to military officials. The earliest grant can be traced back to Dhanga, D-H-A-N-G-A, 954-1002, who granted a village with all the usual rights to the Brahmana Bhatta Yashodhara, 38. Although this grant was made on religious grounds, we learn from another record that the Dhoni held the office of the chief priest and judge. Para. But under the Chandelas, the Kayasthas played an important part in administration. An inscription of Kirtivarman 1073-90 refers to the royal grant of the prosperous village of Darganda to a Vastavya Kayastha dignitary Jajuka, 39, who, as we learn from Ajaygarh rock inscription of Bhoja Varman, was appointed by Ganda, the successor of Dhanga, as a Thakura looking after all the departments of government, 40. His descendant Maheshwara was granted the village of Pipalahika and vested with authority over the gates of Kalanjara by Kirtivarman in recognition of and as a reward for the services that the former rendered to him when he fell in distress in Pitadri, 41, apparently in some battle. The inscription of Bhoja Varman referred to above mentions both these grants. It also speaks of a third grant, 42, under Trilokya Varman, who appointed Vasika, V-A-S-C-K-A, page 145, a member of this Kayastha family as Vishisa, V-I-S-I-S-A, of the fort Jayapura, the present Ajaygarh, and endowed him with a village, 43. The village was obviously made over to him for his military services, for he not only defeated a rebel called Bhojaka and conquered part of his territory, but also pacified the Chandela kingdom and made it secure against foreign enemies, 44. Members of this Kayastha family held important offices for nearly 280 years under the Chandela kings from Ganda to Bhoja Varman, 45. But they generally appear as warriors, since of the 3 grants made to this family, 2 were made for military services. Para. The military aspect comes out prominently in some Chandela grants made to Brahmanas and others. Thus, in 1187, Paramardin granted a pada of land to the Brahmana Senapati Ajaypala, the son of Senapati Kelhana, Kelhana, 46. Again, he granted one pada, PAD, each to one of his sons, Rauta, Rauta, Somaraja, 47, and to two other sons, Maraja and Vatsaraja, 48, who had not attained the position of Rauta. Portions of land granted to the Senapati and his Rauta son were not enough for their maintenance. But in another case, Paramadin granted in 1171 a whole village to the Brahmana Senapati Madanapala Sharma, whose father, grandfather and great-grandfather had held the title of Thakura, 49, a feudal title commonly applied to Brahmana, Kshatriya and Kayastha functionaries of medieval times in northern India. The village was granted to the commander-in-chief free from past, present and future dues, 50, a characteristic of all Chandela grants. But in the above two grants to Brahmana military functionaries, the ground given is not military service but spiritual benefit. Death in the battlefield is clearly stated to be the cause of a grant by Trailokya Varman in 1204, when he granted a village to the heirs of Rauta Samanta as Mrityuha, Vrittau, VRTAU, that is, for the maintenance of the family of the dead, as this Rauta, whose father and grandfather had also held this title, was killed in a fight with the Turuskas, 51. The same king made another grant to the family of the same Rauta in 1205, 52. The Gotra of the grantee is mentioned, 53, but not his caste. Perhaps he was a Kshatriya. An important military dignitary was Nayaka Kula Sharma, son of a Nayaka, grandson of a Rauta and great-grandson of a Ranaka, who was granted by Trailokya Varman in 1208 a village with the usual concessions and terms mentioned in the Chandela grants, 54, page 146. Although the grantee was a Brahmana, we have no reference either to spiritual merit or to some pious occasion connected with this charity. It was therefore a non-sectarian copperplate charter of land given to a hereditary Brahmana military official. Veera Varman, the son and successor of Trailokya Varman, granted in 1254 a village to a Rauta whose father, grandfather and great-grandfather had held this position in succession for an act of valor in battle, 55. But the purpose recorded was the increase of the religious merit of the donor and parents, 56. Although the mention of the Gotra of the grantee, 57, does not necessarily show that he was a Brahmana. Lastly, we may refer to a second grant of Veera Varman made in 1288 to a very important military Brahmana official called Balabhadra Malliya, M.A.L.L.A.Y.A., an illustrious chief of distinguished bravery, who had conquered the Rajas of 6 places, the Turks and rulers from Kashmir, 58. Of course, the purpose specified in the grant was the spiritual benefit of the donor and his parents, 59, but there is no doubt that the beneficiary was a non-Brahmana and that the village was granted in recognition of his great military achievements. Para. The number of Chandela service grants is not negligible, and they make it clear that chief priests, judges, governors of forts, senapatis, nayakas and rautas of the Chandelas were granted land for their services. Whether the rautas were required to serve their king with a fixed number of horses or soldiers cannot be said on the basis of the existing evidence, but most Chandela service tenures seem to be of a military nature. This indicates the preponderance of the military element, which can also be inferred from the mention of as many as 21 Skanda Varas military and administrative camps in the Chandela territory. Para. Under Trilokya Varman in 1212, we find the grant of a village in the form of mortgage, Vitta-bandha, Vitta Bandha, made by a Shaivite teacher, Santa Shiva, son of the royal preceptor Rajaguru, to a Ranaka in consideration of perhaps a huge amount of money which is not mentioned, 60. Unless the Ranaka carried on trade, which seems unlikely, he could have no other source of income than the revenue derived presumably from the land granted to him by the Chandela kings. The Ranaka was a chief of considerable importance, page 147. Since he was served by a Thakura who was authorized to take possession of the village on his behalf, 61. This Chandela mortgage land grant can be compared to a similar deed recorded on a special-sized brick in Jaunpur in 1227. Here we find a Ranaka mortgaging his fields to two other Ranakas in consideration of a loan of 2250 drachmas, 62. Perhaps they had received their land from the Gaharwalas who ruled over Jaunpur. Remarkably enough, in the above-mentioned two instances, the Ranakas are found engaged in money lending and thus increasing their landed property. In such a case, the mortgagee enjoyed limited rights confined to the collection of taxes, 63, or enjoyment of the produce of the fields, so long as the debts were not cleared off. But if the debtor failed to pay off his dues, the mortgaged land would certainly pass under the control of the mortgagee. These two cases, especially the one under the Chandelas, show clear re-granting by local rulers of the land, which presumably had been previously granted to them by their overlords. Such mortgage of land in later medieval France and Germany, that is, from the 12th century onwards, was treated as a fief, the debtor being the lord and the creditor the vassal, 64. Similar relations, however, did not exist between the debtor and creditors in medieval India, para. In UP, the oldest inscriptional evidence for a land grant to an official is found in Gorakhpur about the beginning of the 10th century. A religious benefaction made by the minister Sachiva, Madoli, a son of the Samanta and Mantri Krita Kirti, states that the village he granted to Durga had been obtained by him through the favor of King Jayaditya, 65, who may have been a feudatory of the Gurjara Pratiharas. But we have no service grants by the Pratiharas until we come to Yashpala, perhaps the last ruler of the line. In 1036, this king, while camping at Kara near Allahabad, presented a village in the Mandala of Kausambi as a gift to Mathura Vikata of Pavosa, Pabhosa, 66. This was certainly a non-religious grant made to a non-Brahmana. Probably the grantee was a Kayastha whose ancestors hailed from Mathura. It seems that Mathura Kayasthas served under various dynasties. Thus, the minister of the Chehmana ruler Hamira, Hammira, belonged to the Kataria Kayastha family of Mathura, page 148, whose genealogy is given in an inscription of 1288. Footnote 67. The Gaharwalas, the successors of the Pratiharas in the greater part of UP, are not so far known for any grant to the Kayastha officer, but they made grants to their other vassals and officials on a considerable scale, para. In contrast to the Chandelas, the Gaharwalas generally granted villages to civil officials, mainly Brahmanas, among whom their chief priest, Jaguka or Jagu Sharma, and his son Prahlada Sharma received the lion's share. A survey of 10 Gahravala grants made to this Purahita, who invariably occupied the highest position among the official dignitaries mentioned in the land grants and held office successively under two rulers, Madanapala and Govinda Chandra, shows that he was granted 10 villages situated in about 10 different pattalas, PATTALAS within bracket, fiscal units of the Gahardwala kingdom, 68. The Purohita received a village almost annually between 1114 and 1127, but he then fell into disfavor for about 10 years. He was again restored to favor in 1139 when he received a land grant, 69. The reason for these grants is stated to be spiritual, 70, but this occurs as a matter of form. In reality, the grants seem to be annual payments for services rendered to the Gahardwala rulers. Since the villages granted to him were scattered in 10 different fiscal units, Jagu Sharma could not easily consolidate his power and position. But there is no doubt that his general influence spread over a considerable part of the Gahardwala kingdom. The power and prestige of the family was further extended by 88 grants, extended by 8 grants in favor of Jagu Sharma's son, Prahalada or Praharaja Sharma, who was given a feudatory or military rank of Rauta and who stepped into the shoes of his father as a Mahapurohita, 71. Thus, this Brahmana family enjoyed landed property in 18 pattalas, their total number in the whole kingdom being 60, 72. The grants carried the same rights and privileges as those made to Brahmanas, and between father and son, Jagu Sharma and Prahlada Sharma were entitled to almost all the Gahardwala taxes and imposed specified and unspecified, 73 para. The Gahardwalas also granted villages to some other Brahmana dignitaries who served as hereditary Rautas under them. Thus, in 1133, Govinda Chandra conferred a village on the Brahmana Rauta Jatesha Sharma, whose father was a Rauta and grandfather a Thakura, 74. Page 149. Again in 1168, Jayachandra as Yuvaraj granted a village to 2 hereditary Brahmana Rautas whose father was a Rauta and grandfather a Thakura. The village was granted on spiritual grounds with all rights in perpetuity, 75. In 1186, on similar grounds, Jayachandra granted a village to the Rauta Ananga, whose father and grandfather had been Rautas. We are not sure whether he was a Brahmana, although his Gotra and Pravaras are mentioned, 76. We have only one clear instance of land grants to a Kshatriya Rauta. In 1177, as King Jayachandra bestowed a village on a Kshatriya Rauta, Rajya Dhara Varman, who was the son of the Mahamattaka Thakura Sri Vidyadhara and grandson of the Mahamattaka Thakura Sri Jagadhara, 77. Curiously enough, both the Gotra and Pravaras of this Doni are mentioned, 78, and had he not been described as a Kshatriya, 79, he could easily have been mistaken for a Brahmana, for the grant is accompanied by religious formalities and intended to last as long as the sun and the moon, 80. Rajya Dhara Varmana was evidently a very powerful functionary, as he was assigned 5 other grants besides this, 81. Leaving aside the names of villages and patakas, hamlets, that is mojas or pattis, assigned to this officer, all the 6 grants 1177 to 80 in his favor are similarly worded. They nowhere impose on him any obligation to serve the donor. On the contrary, the object of all these grants is to secure spiritual merit to the donor and his parents. But they could not possibly have been made out of purely altruistic and charitable motives, and certainly not out of religious considerations, for the donee was a kshatriya. Whether he forced the king to make these grants is not clear, but since 3 grants were made to him in 1177 and another 3 in 1180, this suggests that he had become exceptionally powerful during these 2 years. But in spite of half a dozen fiefs, Rajyadhara Varman was not as influential as Jagu Sharma and his son, who had 18 grants to their credit. Para. Under the Gaharavalas, Ranakas also seem to have received some land grants. We hear of a land gift made by the Ranaka Lavara Pravaha in 1109 with the permission of the Yuvaraja Govinda Chandra, apparently acting on behalf of his father Madanapala, 82. Obviously, the Ranaka made this grant out of the village granted to him. Towards the end of the Gahadavala rule, page 150, some Ranakas set up independent principalities. Thus, in 1197, we find a Rauta mentioning not only the lord of Kanyakubja, but also the Rajya kingdom of his immediate Ranaka lord, 85. We also find a Gahadavala feudatory Singara Vatsaraja making a grant in Rapadi Vishaya in 1134 on the same terms as his Gahadavala overlord, 84, although he may have been reinstated in his dominions rather than endowed with any land grants by his suzerain. Para. Since military service and acts of bravery do not appear in the Gahadavala copper plates as reasons for grants of villages to Rautas, as we find in the Chandela grants, we may think that grants were made for general services of all varieties. Ranakas and Rautas, however, are not mentioned in the list of officials so often repeated in the Gahadavala grants. This would suggest that they were vassals distinct from regular officials under the direct control of the state. The number of Rautas was far greater under the Gahadavala than under the Chandelas. Para. There is some evidence to show that apart from the Purahita, even some regular officials were granted villages. This can be inferred from the use of the term Vikara, Vikara-Grama, Gramah, tax-free villages in the Gahadavala copper plates of 1092-93, according to which a whole Patala fiscal unit was granted by Chandra Deva to 500 Brahmanas, 85. The district was granted with the exception of villages belonging to temples and Brahmanas and of tax-free villages, 86. The charter names 25 villages as belonging to temples, 2 villages as belonging to Brahmanas, and 6 villages as tax-free, Vikara Grama, 87. There does not seem to be any sense in taking these villages as belonging to handless people, as has been done by D.R. Sahani, 88. The term Vikara can only mean tax-free, 89, and it appears that these villages were granted to officials. Such tax-free villages may well have existed in the other Patalas of the kingdom also, but they are not noticed because in no other case is a whole Patala granted.